I have been up since like my normal time, 5:45, but I'm still laying here and I have been looking at some things, combing through some things. And I just had to it's a couple of things I'm floating and thinking about, right? Cuz this case really bothers me, right? Um this case bothers me because I talked to you guys before when I told you that there is a book. There are two books that have a profound impact on my point of view, right, of the world. But one of those books is The Native Son by Richard Wright. And for those who are not familiar with the book is about a character by the name of Bigger Thomas. And Bigger Thomas has a family of four as his mom. He's the oldest, and then he has two siblings, a sister and then a younger brother. And so this movie is staged, I believe, in the 50s. It's if you watch the movie, it's in black and white. I think they made an updated version. I do remember seeing an updated version, but I always go with the black and white. Um, so um, Bigger is a young man who is attempting to help take care of his family, as most young black men during that time did, because a lot of times there was the absence of a father, whether it was due to some death, whether it was due to the father just not being there for whatever reason. That this was the story of a lot of black families, and so this is the story of Bigger Thomas in the book Native Son. And Bigger but gets a job as a chauffeur to a white family, and a wealthy white family. And Bigger is doing a good job on his job. And so then the family's daughter, she comes home from college, and Bigger is assigned to chauffeur her around for the day. And the family's daughter is involved with a communist named Jan. Jan is a boy, right? And she tells Bigger, hey, go pick up my friend Jan. And so they go and they pick Jan up, and they ride around for the day doing various things. Bigger is being the chauffeur to them. This is his job, right? And so Bigger, um, hold on one second, guys. I had my patio open, you guys, so I just wanted to close it because I'm getting a little warm. Give me 1 second. So Bigger is staying in the car while Jan and the daughter go and do all of these different things they want to do while they're having fun. And so at the end of the night, they end up at a place where it's a pool hall, and they have some drinks and do all that. And the daughter of the family, she engages Bigger in conversation, and she engages him in the activity for the evening. And so then after the activities are over with, the daughter has Bigger drop Jan back off at his home, and then Bigger, and during this time, the reason why I said this communist named Jan is because during this time, this was dealing with the Vietnam War. And we know that there was this ideology about people who they thought were communists during that time. And so this was not somebody favorable to the family. This is not someone that the family wanted her to be around. And so at the end of the night, Bigger drops off Jan, and him and the daughter proceed to go home. Now, there's a key thing in this story is that the mother of the family, she is blind. She cannot see. And so Bigger, the daughter is so intoxicated that she can barely get herself into the house. She's tripping, stumbling, and fumbling, right? And so Bigger is looking like, oh my goodness, if she is like found in an unsavory way, someone is going to assume that I may have done something. So let me carry her upstairs so she can sleep this off. So Bigger picks up this white woman that he works for her family, and he takes her upstairs to her bedroom. And while Bigger is in the bedroom putting her to bed, um, in walks in the blind mother. The mother cannot see. Bigger panics because he doesn't want anyone to know that he's in that room. And he knows that the mother has a disadvantage because she cannot see. But because she cannot see, her other senses are heightened. And so Bigger knows if this daughter makes any utterance, that I'm going to get found out. And it's going to be found out that I'm here in this room. And then I could get accused of something. And so Bigger proceeds to grab a pillow from off of the bed and place the pillow over top of the daughter's face, just enough until the mother leaves the room, just enough so that the mother can believe that she is asleep. So the mother calls out for the daughter several times. The daughter doesn't answer, and then she leaves the room. When Bigger removes the pillow from her face, she's dead. She is dead. And this sets off a chain of unfortunate events that Bigger finds himself in, right? Which ultimately leads to Bigger receiving the death penalty for the crime that he committed. Now, a lot of people will ask, why do I tell that story? Why is that story so important to me? Why was that story such an important piece of my college experience? The reason why that story was such an is still to this day such an important piece is because as a society, there are things that we have going on that impact people's responses to tight, tense situations. It will cause someone to have an overreaction, to have an over exaggeration that could have grave consequences in the end. Something that was well intended, something that was not meant to be a tragedy, ends up tragic, right? And in this case with Karmelo, I see Bigger Thomas. You see this young boy with a 3.7 grade point average. He's a track star, he's a football star. And it's raining outside. He's at the track meet doing what normal kids do. And he sees a familiar face in the rain and says, okay, I'm going to go over to this canopy tent in order for me to get away from the rain and say hi to a friend. And because of socialization in America, we end up with this tragedy. Something made these boys think that it was okay for them to do what they did to Karmelo and not have any consequence. Now, I'm not saying that the consequence should have ended the way that it did, but surely we have to consider the fact that these boys, that this altercation is staged on a set of bleachers. This is something that is being left out from how I'm hearing the story being told. They are talking about the scene being sitting on bleachers, right? But they're not putting the emphasis on why this is important. They're not putting the emphasis on the fact that this boy has epilepsy and that this crime is staged on a set of bleachers where two boys over 200 pounds are intimidating this boy who is much smaller in stature. He's sitting down. They're standing up. The witness, one of the witnesses, the student witnesses from yesterday, said that Karmelo was sitting down and he had his hand inside of his backpack. It is assumed that the knife came from out of that backpack, according to most of the people that were eyewitnesses. That's something I think we can say is consistent. However, he's sitting down, not in any position of trying to provoke or intimidate. He didn't come to that tent to provoke or intimidate. He's sitting down. He has his hands in his bag because he's being aggressed upon by two huge boys. And then now we're hearing more people ask him to leave. So now we know that this had become a crowd thing. You got these two boys in his face, and then you got everybody else around them that are rallying because he goes there thinking that this one boy is his friend, and then fuck around and found out that's not my friend. Because the moment that his teammates said that they wanted me gone in a bad weather condition, that he was signed up for it too and agreed. And somehow the people of Texas and other people around the United States think that it is enough that a white person asks you to leave somewhere and you should just leave. That you have to leave. That you're not entitled to be there. This sounds like congregating while black, but there's only one little black boy. There's one lone wolf in the room. But when congregating while black is a crime in this country, because at one point it was, now all of a sudden seeking refuge under the shelter of another canopy tent at a track meet becomes a first-degree crime. And this is what these prosecutors need you to believe in order for you to convict. You can only convict if you believe that Karmelo committed a crime by being in that tent. Not if you don't think he should have been there because it wasn't proper etiquette, but that he committed a crime by being in that tent. Because that's the only thing that would take away his duty to not retreat. Is if you believe he committed a crime by being in that tent. And so the way that they want to frame him committing a crime is by trying to get us to forget, just forget the fact. So what, he was pushed on a set of bleachers. On a set of bleachers where that push could have led to him tumbling down and then suffering some bad traumatic experience. This wasn't on a leveled playing field on a ground. They weren't standing on the ground under a tent. This was on a set of bleachers where this child who was being pushed by these over 200-pound boys could have come tumbling down. One of the student witnesses from yesterday, he testified to the fact that Karmelo's hand was inside of the backpack. He was pushed. And when the next thing they know, there is a wound. This student did not imply that Karmelo took this knife and stabbed intentionally in the heart Austin Metcalf. That is not what this student implied. This student, the way that this student told the story, might lead some to believe that his hand was in the backpack because he knew that he had his pocket knife, which was 3.5 inches, while we are having some of the media trying to get as close to that 5.5 as possible, because the 5.5 would mean a more serious consequence. But there is no way you get to that because he would have been charged with it. That would be the crime. The reason why he's not charged with the carrying of a knife is because of what we discussed before jury selection. And so you have this boy, 17-year-old little black boy, another one of my favorites, who is on this bench. He is on this set of bleachers. We know bleachers are tiered. We know that some are made of wood, some are made of metal. I'm not sure, they didn't say what kind of material that these bleachers were made of. But what we do know is that he was on a higher level of the bleachers, not on a lower. Because when they describe the children running, they say they see the children running down the bleachers. So they were not at the bottom half. They were either somewhere in the middle or at the top. And the pushing that was done, the student said that Austin pushed him with both hands. Both hands. If Karmelo from that push had come tumbling down those bleachers and something would have happened to him, what would be the defense for the Metcalf boys? That's a question that I want the jury to consider. That's the question that I want the public to consider. The witness yesterday who testified about the possibility of intimidation from those two brothers, he testified to that. He said, I could see where maybe there was some intimidation. This is the prosecution's witness. But you're not hearing a lot of people talk about this. You're not hearing a lot of people in the mainstream media because the headlines that you hear is how the prosecution is dismantling Karmelo's self-defense defense. You are not hearing about the story of the coordination text messages between the students of trying to make sure that they are all on the same page of what they claimed that they saw that day of the event. You are not hearing about how one student provides something in his testimony that wasn't in the police report. The prosecution wanted you to believe that Karmelo tried to flee the stadium when he actually went into the safety of a coach and explained to the coach what he had did and was panicked about what he had done. And he's anxious and he's scared and he's hysterical. These are some of the words that are described. I was just trying to defend myself. I didn't mean to do it. At that point, he did not know that what he did was a death blow. He just knew that he was being aggressed upon. He tried to break away from the situation as fast as he could and then get to an adult. In his child mind. Now, listen, they want us to believe that big ass Austin, and yes, I'm going there. Yes, I'm going there. Because a lot of people like the victim shame. So I'm going to do some victim shaming this morning. That big ass, they want us to believe that big ass Austin was just a child. Well, Karmelo was just a child. Why isn't that being considered? Why is he being looked at as a monster? Why is he being looked at like he is a grown man who should have had better understanding and better sense and better judgment than the two boys that aggressed upon him, than the other kids who were around him? Why is that the case? Let me go here. Let me tell you something. These defense attorneys, if by the grace of God not, but if Karmelo is found guilty, they are going to have a field day with this appeal. I understand they did the Batson challenge, right? Because of the makeup of this jury. Okay? And when the judge went and reviewed the information, the judge came to the determination that the prosecution had an out. They had an escape clause. I love that term. The judge realized that the prosecution had an escape clause. And the escape clause that the judge felt was just satisfied the burden was that these three teachers were educators and that the prosecution did not want these three Black women who were educators on this jury because they thought that people who work with children would not be able to make a fair decision. I want to challenge that. I think that teachers who work with children are the best experts to make a fair decision because they know from a day-to-day basis the challenges that they face with children with adults and children with one another. It is a reason that they are teachers. They are not just teachers because they are teaching whatever subject that they are teaching to these kids or these young adults or to these non-traditional students. In some instances where you have professors, they're not just teachers for that reason. They're also teachers because they know how to deal with conflict resolution. Their critical thinking was necessary for that jury. To say that you have a bias because of their profession, because they are teachers, and to think that they are going to be biased and not be able to come to a fair conclusion because of that can be challenged. That these teachers on a day-to-day basis deal with conflict resolution. And so how would they look at how Austin approached this situation, how Hunter approached this situation? And they would look at it with a certain degree of fairness. They would assess it with fairness. They are the experts on the jury. Those three teachers would have been the experts on the jury. They wouldn't have taken anything away from the jury. They wouldn't have been, you can't determine that they would have been unable to assess fairly. They assess fairly daily. It is in their job description. It is part of their profession. This is what they do. I don't know all of what was argued through this challenge. I'm assuming that no matter what was argued, that the judge would have been able to say that this is a reasonable justification from the prosecution. But I agree with some of the anchors that they had on Fox News that this was a huge mistake if Karmelo is found guilty. If Karmelo is found guilty, and unfortunately, it may be a lengthy appeals process, I do believe that there will be some issue with this issue when it comes to the jury. Now, just because I believe that that is the case doesn't mean that I'm not giving this jury that is seated the opportunity to make a fair, impartial decision. We don't know yet. We don't know what will be the decision of this jury. It is not an all-white jury. There are 3 Asian women, which we will have to see how that plays. There is another woman whose racial identity is not well defined, according to several of the um, commentators. They can't kind of determine what gender she is. I mean, what race she is. I think they said that there's a Middle Eastern man that's on the jury. But these are all potential jurors because nobody is going to know who will be the final ones until it's to the end, right? So they don't know who's going to be making out of the 16, I believe, that were chosen. They don't know which ones will be choosing to make the final decision. Will be chosen to make the final decision. And so this is what we are looking at right now. But I wanted to come this morning and talk to you guys because the idea that the media keeps doing these things in order to try to get them to this threshold. You see them. That's why I'm glad we talked about this on Monday prior to them getting started with testimony. We talked about this knife, or Monday, I can't remember what day, I'm all messed up, but whatever day, we talked about this knife prior to any opening statements. The size of this knife, the importance of it. We are seeing that play out. We are looking at them trying to get us to forget that Austin took both of his hands and attempted to push this child on bleachers, on a set of bleachers. Right? Bleachers that are on an incline. Bleachers that are tiered. That could have been life-threatening in any child's case, but especially a child with epilepsy. You're not hearing the mainstream media put any emphasis on Karmelo's epilepsy. So then when the public starts to talk about and have this conversation, some of the public don't even know. They're not having an honest conversation about what took place that day. Because the people in the courtroom who are responsible for reporting and the ones who have the loudest voice are allowing people to do what I just represented on my community post. They are allowing them to distort the facts, knowing they are sitting in the courtroom and hearing something different. The individual on the panel with Courtroom Confidential, he is responsible for providing contemporaneous notes on this case and sending them out from the courtroom. This is what he's doing. In his reporting, he reports that the knife is 3.5 inches, but he allows Courtroom Confidential from his platform to say almost 5 inches in his face. This is what is being allowed. And so we are seeing. Now listen, I don't want anybody to take what I'm saying and try to run and spin some other kind of direction with it and try to make it something that it's not, because this situation just don't fit. I don't believe every non-traditional media source that goes into a courtroom and starts to report, especially when I know that those individuals have an ulterior motive and an ulterior agenda. I believe neutral commentators who have shown the proof that they report the facts of the prosecution accurately and that is consistent with what the traditional media is reporting, what the prosecution is saying, and then they are also reporting what the defense team is doing. That gives credibility to that source for me. If they can report what the prosecution's case and relaying, and that's what we are seeing predominantly in the news cycle being reported, and they can say, yes, this is what we heard, this is what we saw them do, this is what they did well, this is where we think the defense may have some trouble, and then they report what happened with the defense cross-examination, and they are telling us some things that we are not getting in the traditional media. But when we look at the notes of these people who are going out and disseminating the information, it is consistent with what some of these content creators are reporting. That gives credibility to me. In certain other trials, I don't have that confidence in the people who were eyewitnesses to the account, because they went there with another motive. They went there on another agenda. And they were not even honest about the presentation of the prosecution's case. And so I don't want anybody trying to use me or what I'm saying in this situation is no kind of example to try to justify or spin some other kind of narrative, because this ain't that. It was a lot of deceptiveness on all sides of other situations. And I don't believe a lot of them. And then in some instances, I believe some of the sources that tried to stay more in the middle on the neutral side. But when I hear somebody coming out saying some shit that ain't consistent with what the transcripts is saying, and then they want me to believe and take their word for it just because hell no, I ain't doing that. I know how to divide fact from fiction. I know how to go out and seek information and look and sift through it so that I can find what is true and what is not. My brain is fully capable of getting the story, of understanding the story, getting the things, getting the plot twist. I'm more than capable of that. And so this ain't that. This is something that is not what that is. Lastly, what I want to say, I keep hearing these people try to justify that goddamn Kyle Rittenhouse and that goddamn George Zimmerman, and they are trying to compare this boy Karmelo Anthony to what these two individuals did after they committed that crime versus what this boy Karmelo did. It was more intent in what those two individuals did than it is in Carmelo's whole body. They had more intent in their pinky finger than Carmelo had in his whole person. This is absurd, what is happening right here. I'm all too familiar with the history. I'm familiar with our actual history, and I'm familiar with the history through literature. We see this type of thing time and time again. To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm not talking about people who actually didn't committed a crime. I'm not talking about people who think that it's okay. They committed a crime that are of color who thought it was okay for them to trespass black bodies. Because this ain't that. Karmelo cannot be compared to someone who thought that it was okay for them to trespass the black bodies of women. And so for some reason, people try to make every situation fit no matter what. They accuse other people of trying to do it. And when other people are doing it honestly, they will cast aspersions on it. But then you will hear the most ridiculous thing. It's like, how do you see this person, you idolize this person so much to the point that you see him in everything like he Jesus. This is a sickness. That is a sickness, in my opinion. The situation don't fit when you want it to be exclusive. And you want to make it look like that this is something isolated and this has never happened before. And this is the first time in history. And that this is this major attack. But then the minute something comes that you want to use in order to justify your point, you will say, well, this always happening. We've been saying it's happening. Well, we've been telling y'all it's happening, and we've been telling y'all that these are the things criminals do, but y'all don't listen to that. None of it is unique. But this situation with this boy has nothing to do out with what is trying to be attached, especially when you're trying to compare it to someone who transgressed black bodies. Karmelo was not the transgressor of black bodies. His black body was transgressed against. And the people, just like in other situations, want it to be excused. They want it to brush it off. They want to put it off to the side. Just forget about the fact that someone advanced upon his black body with no justification, with no excuse, with no explanation. They don't even want to spend no time on it for real. Forget that. His black body was transgressed against. And this is what led to this altercation taking place. That's exactly what they want. That's exactly what a lot of people do, including some black Americans. They want people to forget that black bodies were transgressed against. Just forget it and move on and go on with your life. This ain't that. This ain't that situation. This don't fit. You got a circle and a square. It don't go. You know, you get one of them little kids Fisher Price toys, and they got the circle, the square, and the triangle. No, this shit don't fit. It don't fit in the box. So I don't want it to be mistaken and conflated or sound like a contradiction. I have always spoke up in instances like this, and I have a lengthy history. I have a lengthy experience with doing that. And I understand it because I understand it both from an actual perspective of real life experience, but I also have some literary background where this has been part of my life. This has been something that's been impactful on my life. When I say that Richard Wright and The Native Son was impactful to me as a young teen, this is something that has impacted my worldview on how people respond because of social conditioning, because of social norms, because of social biases, because of racism, classism, sexism. These are the things that I have always considered. And so when I'm looking at the case of Karmelo Anthony, I'm looking at Bigger Thomas and Native Son. And we are looking at a series of unfortunate events. And unfortunately, Bigger had no defense because his defense was merely his fear that he may get caught in that room. And what would be the public lynching of him if he were caught in the room of his employer with his white daughter? That was no defense. What may have happened was no defense for Bigger. And Bigger sits in that jail cell with no defense. It leads him to commit another murder. Not just the murder of their daughter, he then kills another woman, a black woman, and trying to run and get away from the situation. This is the impact of life in America. That children, adults, make these types of decisions, and it can happen on both sides of the fence because there's stigma on both sides. There's biases on both sides. There's stereotyping on both sides, on all sides. Listen to what they are saying about, oh, they felt like the Metcalf brothers did the right thing in trying to get Karmelo out of the tent because they knew some kind of way, they had some intuitiveness that they knew that this was a thug inside of their tent. This the same Texas that allows big burly white boys to carry assault rifles. But you, look at what you are doing to this little scrawny, puny little boy carrying a knife of 3.5 inches. Was it proper for him to have on school grounds? No. Was it a felony? No. It was a misdemeanor. And furthermore, it's not even a misdemeanor. It's not even a misdemeanor because in this situation, the problem was that it could be considered a misdemeanor, Class A misdemeanor, that he trespassed on school grounds with it. But routinely, and this is what was stated, no one is ever charged with that. No one is ever charged with doing that. What will happen to the student? Maybe if it was an adult, maybe they would have be charged with it. I don't know. If an adult came on school grounds with a knife of that size, maybe they would be charged with it. But what routinely happens to students when they are on school grounds and they are found in possession of a knife of any kind, it described them. We went over it. And it is because of the Department of Education policy, not because of the criminal codes, the law, right? The penal code. They can be disciplined up to expulsion. And that is what happened to Karmelo. And that, I would have to say, I could not disagree with. Because it was a violation. It is a zero tolerance school zone. And in zero tolerance school zones, they don't even want to hear, no, he hit me, so I hit him back. They expect both individuals. And this is something that I would place emphasis on, since this is the route that is being taken, as if all of the blame is being put onto Karmelo for not leaving, for bringing the knife, for doing all of these things, right? Since all the blame is being put on him, I would place emphasis on this zero tolerance school policy where it says we don't care whether or not someone hits you and you hit them back or vice versa. Both of you are going to suffer the consequence. And so it seems as though that because one of them is no longer here, that people are making it appear that this was a saint. And we are finding out through some of the testimony that this was not a saint at all. He was a kid. He was a belligerent kid. He was a kid that did not have respect for his coaches. He did not have respect for his teammates. He did not have respect for what he committed himself to doing. They felt like that they could go do other things instead of doing what they needed to do as teammates and team members. And so for us to believe that on that day, he all of a sudden had an epiphany that he needed to be a better leader or whatever, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. This is what I'm getting when I'm listening to the testimony. But I know everybody doesn't get that. But you want to know who would have got it? Them teachers. These are parts of the testimony that those teachers, those 3 black female teachers would have heard. They would have been able to identify where this was going and what route this was going on. But you exclude the experts. They the experts. That's what the system tells us. The system tells us that the teachers are experts, that they are good conflict resolutionists. Not all of them, but a lot of them. That's why they work with kids, right? They are the experts in the room. They deal with kids every day. But you disqualify them because you say you think they will be biased. You would think that they would not be able to fairly apply and administer the law. What do you consider fairness? That's the question. How are you judging fairness? And were you purposefully being unfair in the jury selection of this child? How a prosecution team, of course, everybody wants to win, but there is some integrity in how you select a team. And the type of integrity that I would have anticipated and expected is that at least one of those three black women would have been on that jury. You didn't have to keep all three of them, but you would have kept one of them in the room. You would have kept the most solid one that you thought this one looks like she knows how to deal with kids who are in conflict and that she can add to the conversation in that deliberation room. And I would feel like that if she was on that jury, that she would be able to tie this all in order to understand what I'm saying. When I see that type of integrity in a prosecutor, and their honesty, I think the explanation for excluding them speaks more to the integrity of that prosecution team than what we really understand. It's not about justice, and I'm not speaking, of course, I'm speaking on this case. It's not about justice. It's about the win. A prosecutor with some integrity would have wanted to keep one of those women so that there would be no implication that this jury was biased because there were no African Americans on it. They would have came out and spoke about the selection of that one black female educator and why they kept her there and what they felt she could do for them in their case. But no, it was a danger. It was dangerous for multiple reasons. Not because they were black, not just because they were black, not just because they were women, but also because they were educators who understand the conflicts between children and how to resolve them. And whether or not who provoked the situation, what kind of intimidation, they have the experience. They see it every day. And so the exclusion of all three of those black female jurors to me says something about the integrity of that prosecution team. On that note, y'all, I'm out of here. I'm gonna try to see if I can take me a nap because I do have somewhere I have to be midday. But I'm gonna try to take a quick nap because, like I said, I have been up since like 5:30ish. So I'm gonna try to take a quick nap. Leave your questions, comments, concerns, suggestions in the comment section of this video, and I will respond to all of them. You all have a great Saturday. If I'm not able to come back and talk to you guys again later, but hopefully I will probably closer to the end of the night be able to come back and talk to you guys once I'm able to listen into some of the content for today's proceedings. You all have a great day.